The camera pans over a crowded audition hall. Contestants whisper nervously, judges shuffle papers, and a bright spotlight illuminates the stage. Amid the chaos, Miguel, a 16-year-old Filipino teen from Cebu, steps forward. His clothes are worn, his shoes scuffed, but his eyes shine with quiet determination. He clutches a tattered notebook filled with lyrics he's written from the heart. The room buzzes with skepticism, but Miguel doesn't hear it. He takes a deep breath, knowing this is more than an audition. It's his chance to show the world that talent and courage can rise from the humblest beginnings. The backstage area was alive with a nervous energy that seemed to buzz in Miguel's chest. The scent of hairspray and perfume mixed with the faint metallic temps of stage lights. Contestants hustled past him, chattering excitedly, rehearsing last-minute notes and gestures. Some wore flashy jackets and designer shoes. Others carried sleek instruments that gleamed under the dim hallway lights. And then there was Miguel, 16-year-old from Cebu, Philippines. In a shirt that had seen better days and a pair of worn sneakers with frayed laces, he clutched his tattered notebook, edges bent and pages filled with lyrics scrawled in his own careful handwriting. Each word was more than a line of a song. It was a fragment of his life, a memory of long nights spent caring for his younger siblings after school, the echo of his mother's laughter, and the quiet ache of dreams deferred. His fingers trembled slightly as he flipped to the first page, tracing the words like they were a lifeline. Around him, the world felt impossibly loud. Contestants laughed and practiced, stagehands shouted cues, and the thrum of excitement from the audience beyond the curtains seeped into the hallway. Miguel felt tiny in comparison, like a small flame trying to shine in the middle of a storm. But beneath the nervous flutter in his chest was a steady heartbeat of determination. He had waited for this moment his whole life. And nothing, not flashy costumes, not loud voices, not the intimidating presence of the judges could take it away from him as the stage manager called the next group. Miguel's name echoed in the room. His breath caught, his stomach twisted into knots. For a moment, he imagined stepping onto that glittering stage and tripping over the microphone cable, or forgetting a note and crumbling under the judge's eyes. But then he took a deep breath and remembered why he was here. Not to impress anyone with style, not to compete with the louder voices in the room, but to share his heart through song. He imagined his siblings at home, waiting for him to succeed, imagining a future brighter than their present. He thought of every small act of kindness he had witnessed: the neighbor sharing a loaf of bread, the teacher staying late to help struggling students, and realized that music, like kindness, had the power to reach across boundaries and touch hearts. And then the call came. "Miguel, you're up next." He stood, feeling the rough fabric of his shirt against his skin, and took one last look around the crowded hallway. There were voices of doubt, and yes, there were glimmers of fear, but there was also courage, his own. With a deep inhale, he stepped toward the stage, the bright lights washing over him. The audience chatter faded into silence in his mind. All that existed now was the music he had carried in his heart for so long. Miguel's journey had begun. The worn shoes, the tattered notebook, the trembling hands, all of it was irrelevant compared to the voice that was about to rise and make the world listen. The moment Miguel's foot crossed the threshold onto the stage, the bright lights hit him like a wave. The audience's chatter became a distant hum, replaced by the pounding of his own heartbeat. He adjusted the microphone, feeling the familiar grooves of the metal under his fingertips. This was it, the moment he had dreamed of for years. He took a deep breath and began to sing. His voice started soft, trembling just enough to reveal his vulnerability, carrying the story of his life, late nights caring for his younger siblings, the quiet sacrifices he had made to help them dream, and the hope that one day his own dreams would take flight. The judges watched intently, pens hovering over their notepads. For a few moments, Miguel felt weightless, like he and the song were the only things in the room. Then, disaster struck. The microphone crackled violently, emitting a sharp, unpleasant static. Some contestants might have frozen. Some might have fled the stage in embarrassment. But Miguel didn't flinch. He leaned slightly toward the microphone, letting the crackle mingle with his voice rather than break it. He closed his eyes and poured every ounce of emotion into the lyrics, allowing the melody to soar over the technical mishap. The audience began to quiet, intrigued by the audacity of this small boy who refused to be silenced. With each verse, his voice gained strength, blending raw emotion with a surprising control that seemed to belie his age. The microphone crackles became almost imperceptible, swallowed by the warmth and clarity of his singing. The judges exchanged skeptical glances. Simon Cowell, known for his exacting standards and critical eye, leaned back slightly, eyebrows raised. But even Simon couldn't ignore the honesty radiating from Miguel's performance. There was no pretense, no grand theatrics. Just a story, told with pure emotion. As Miguel continued, the lyrics painted vivid pictures. A family struggling together. Laughter echoing through a modest home. Small acts of love that had shaped him into the person he was. He sang not just to win, but to honor the journey that had brought him here. Every note, every pause, carried his heart by the chorus. The room was nearly silent. Strangers in the audience leaned forward, captivated. People began whispering to each other, their eyes glistening. As the story unfolded not just in words, but in feelings that transcended language, the microphone no longer mattered. What mattered was the connection Miguel had created, bridging the gap between his humble reality and the lives of everyone listening. For the first time, he felt that his voice had power not just to entertain, but to heal, inspire, and move people. He realized that challenges were part of the journey, and setbacks didn't define success. His music, born from struggle and perseverance, was stronger because of it. As the last verse approached, Miguel's voice soared, steady and clear, leaving a hush over the room. Even in the face of technical difficulties and towering competition, he had transformed his vulnerability into strength, earning not just attention, but respect. As Miguel reached the middle of his song, something unexpected happened. In the audience, he noticed a small girl sitting quietly in the front row, clutching a worn ragdoll against her chest. Her eyes were wide and glistening with tears. And for a moment, Miguel felt a pang of recognition. He was reminded of his own little sister waiting at home for him, struggling to make sense of the world while he chased his dreams. A surge of emotion flooded him. But instead of faltering, it fueled him. He imagined every note reaching not only the judges, but every person listening, every child, every parent, every dreamer who had ever been overlooked. He sang with newfound intensity, letting the story of love, resilience, and hope pour from his heart. The melody rose and fell, each phrase colored with longing, sacrifice, and an unspoken promise that even the smallest voice could carry a message that mattered. The audience became mesmerized. People leaned forward in their seats, silent but captivated, drawn in not just by the technical precision of his singing, but by the raw, undeniable authenticity of his performance. This wasn't a showcase of talent alone, it was a bridge between hearts. Every listener could feel the struggles and victories embedded in Miguel's lyrics. Even the judges, famously tough and composed, were visibly moved. Simon Cowell, who had built a career on critique, leaned forward in his chair, eyes fixed on the teen, a subtle glimmer of awe breaking through his usual stoicism. The camera captured the moment perfectly. Simon's expression shifting from evaluation to admiration, his mouth slightly open as if words could not contain the impact of what he was witnessing. Miguel's gaze briefly returned to the little girl in the front row. He saw her nod slightly, a small hesitant smile tugging at the corners of her lips. In that instant, he realized something profound. Music was not just entertainment, it was connection. His story, his voice, had reached across the distance between performer and audience, turning strangers into witnesses, listeners into companions in his journey. As he moved into the final lines of the verse, Miguel's emotions were no longer separate from his singing. They were inseparable. Each note carried gratitude, love, and hope. He imagined the families at home, children inspired to dream despite hardships, and anyone who had ever felt small or overlooked. His voice, trembling at first, had transformed into a vessel of empathy, touching lives with something far more powerful than virtuosity alone. By the end of the verse, The auditorium was silent, hanging on his every word. The little girl's tears had fallen freely now, but they were tears of recognition and inspiration. Miguel, too, felt a tear escape, not from fear or nervousness, but from understanding the profound impact of sharing his story so honestly. In that moment, he realized that the true power of his talent was not just in hitting the right notes or impressing the judges, it was in reaching hearts, creating a shared experience of hope, resilience, and humanity. For the first time, he understood that his voice could do more than perform, it could heal, inspire, and unite. As Miguel approached the final chorus, the room seemed to hold its breath. Every note he sang carried not just melody but the weight of years of struggle, sacrifice, and hope. His voice, once hesitant and soft, now soared with confidence and emotional depth, filling every corner of the auditorium. The microphone's earlier crackles were gone, replaced by a pure, resonant sound that seemed to reverberate inside every heart present. The audience, previously captivated, was now visibly moved. Eyes glistened with tears, and quiet murmurs of awe spread like wildfire. People who had arrived with skepticism or casual curiosity were now leaning forward, completely absorbed. The little girl in the front row had buried her face in her hands, trembling slightly, while her grip on the ragdoll tightened, her tears a testament to the connection Miguel had forged across the stage. Simultaneously, the judges sat in stunned silence. Simon Cowell, who had witnessed countless auditions, sat frozen for a moment, his usual critical demeanor replaced by raw emotion. He leaned forward in his chair, eyes glistening as Miguel's voice seemed to transcend language, nationality, and expectation. There was no stage performance, no gimmicks. Just a teen who had poured his entire heart into a song that was as much about his life as it was about every person listening. Miguel's high notes rose effortlessly, each one punctuated with the subtle emotion that made his performance unforgettable. The rhythm of his breathing, the subtle pauses, and the heartfelt vibrato created a perfect balance of technical skill and human emotion. He wasn't singing to win, he was singing to reach souls, and in that, he had already succeeded. As the final note lingered in the air, the room fell into a profound, suspended silence. For a heartbeat, no one moved. No one breathed too loudly. The power of the moment seemed to suspend time itself. And then, as if on cue, the auditorium erupted. The audience leaped to their feet, applause and cheers filling the room in a wave of overwhelming sound. Tears streamed freely down faces everywhere, from strangers in the seats to parents clutching their children. Miguel himself felt the weight of the applause wash over him, his cheeks wet, his heart pounding with the realization that he had truly reached them. Simon Cowell, normally so reserved and precise with his words, stood slowly, his hands trembling slightly as he finally spoke. His voice cracked with emotion. "I have never heard anything like that in my life. That was extraordinary." The other judges nodded, some wiping away tears, their faces reflecting the sheer impact of Miguel's performance. Miguel's legs shook as he stepped back from the microphone, overwhelmed not by nerves, but by the magnitude of what had just happened. He had shared his story, his struggles, his hopes, and in doing so, he had touched hearts, inspired others, and left a permanent mark on everyone in the room. This was more than applause. This was validation, connection, and the affirmation that a small voice, when spoken with courage and authenticity, could echo across the world. In that golden moment, Miguel realized that success wasn't just measured by judges' approval, it was measured by the lives touched, the hope ignited, and the humanity shared. And in that realization, he smiled through his tears, knowing he had done exactly that. Backstage, the roar of the standing ovation still echoed like distant thunder, but Miguel stood frozen in disbelief, trying to steady his breath. The bright stage lights had faded behind him, replaced by the soft glow of hallway lamps and the hushed whispers of crew members still processing what they had just witnessed. He wiped his cheeks, but the tears kept coming, not from fear or uncertainty, but from a sense of release. The years of hardship, responsibility, and dreaming had all led to this moment, and at last, The world had heard him. Suddenly, a woman approached and wrapped her arms around him. She wasn't family, but she hugged him like she knew the weight he had carried. "Your voice," she said through her tears. "You healed something in me tonight." Before he could respond, others began to gather around. A father thanked him for reminding him to call his daughter. A teenager confessed that Miguel's performance gave him the courage to keep singing despite being bullied. Even one of the crew members admitted quietly, "I've worked here 10 years. No voice has ever hit me like that." Miguel listened, stunned, humbled, overwhelmed. He had just wanted to sing, but he'd done something deeper. He had made people feel. Then, through the crowd, he spotted her, the little girl from the front row. She stood hesitantly a few feet away, the ragdoll still clutched tightly to her chest. Miguel walked toward her with a gentle smile. She looked up with watery eyes and whispered, "When you were singing, I didn't feel alone anymore." Miguel knelt down to her height. "You're not alone," he said softly. "And you're going to do amazing things. Just don't stop believing in yourself, okay?" The girl nodded, a shy but genuine smile replacing her sadness, as she turned to leave. She looked back once more, and in her eyes, Miguel saw something familiar: hope. The same hope he fought to hold on to every day of his life. With the crowd slowly dispersing, Miguel stepped outside through the back door of the theater. The evening air was cool and refreshing. The city stretched out before him, tall buildings, bright lights, traffic humming in the distance. For the first time, the world didn't feel overwhelming. It felt full of possibility. He looked up at the night sky, where the last streaks of sunset melted into twilight. The weight he had carried for so long, the fear of not being enough, the worry of letting his family down slowly lifted. He wasn't famous yet, and he didn't know what the competition would bring. But none of that mattered. Tonight had shown him something far more important. His voice had meaning. His story mattered, and the world had listened, smiling. Miguel took a deep breath and whispered a quiet promise to himself, a promise to keep singing. Not for applause or trophies, but for connection, for kindness, for every person who needed to feel seen and heard. He stepped forward, walking into the night, into the future, into a life forever changed, not because he won, but because he touched hearts.